All right, we're beginning tonight for the rest of this trimester, series of studies on leadership. And the first thing we're going to do is tell you why we think we need leadership, but our focus is tonight on what is a leader, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So let's talk about our goal and our purpose in this series of studies. It will be conducted as a class. This is not a lecture, though there will be a great portion of it that I will present. But our goal and our purpose in the study is to develop future leaders. And so by that we simply mean we're interested in those that may be near readiness of being leaders. By leaders we're talking about being elders, though the principle of leadership will apply in a number of areas in your life. You say, I'll never be qualified to be an elder, but I would like to be a leader in my home and my family. And so these principles will apply. A woman may say, well, I will never be an elder, obviously, but I want to be a leader in my home and lead my children and lead other women and lead some others, and some principles will apply. Our primary focus is going to be on developing leaders in the church in the sense of developing future elders. So why the entire group instead of just focusing with some men? You'll see that in a moment. But we're interested in looking at those who may be in near readiness to polish their skills toward being leaders, toward being elders. And then there are younger men sitting here tonight that are just starting their families. Some may not even be married yet. That I hope you're making your goal to be an elder someday in the future. And you're not near the point of being elders by age and children's age, but working on leadership qualities as part of this series and this goal. But it's also to help prepare women to be wives of leaders, to understand this is the principle of leadership. This is what goes on in leadership. These are the decisions that are being made. And you say, well, that doesn't apply to me either. I'm not going to be the leader, not going to be the wife. It's to help us all understand what elders deal with as leaders. Not that you might have sympathy for us. We're not interested in that. What we're interested in is people having a good understanding of the role of leadership and decisions that have to be made, many of which are judgment calls. And the difficulty sometimes that comes with that. For example, during COVID, we dealt with some difficult things that none of us thought we would ever deal with. And you're operating a balancing act where you have some who are of this opinion and you have some who are of that opinion, some who think this whole thing was a hoax, others think that we're all about to die, and you're trying to do what's best for everybody, making judgment calls. Any call you make was not going to be acceptable or pleasing to everybody. Those are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about. How do you lead through that? So that everyone understands. So we want men, women, and young people to understand the role and the principles of leadership. Now, some of you will remember, and others won't be old enough to remember. Come January, it will have been 30 years, and we taught this in an abbreviated form 30 years ago. In January and February 95, we went through this in preparation for appointing elders for the first time in the history of this local church. And part of it was getting people ready to understand leadership as well as getting men ready for leadership. That was 6 lessons. This is going to be expanded into 17. So that's our purpose and our goal. Now, one of the questions that we want to raise, and the elders want you to be aware of this at the beginning, though this will not take place till probably December or January. And that is, who do you think is elder material? By elder material, we do not mean by that they're qualified today to be appointed. In fact, some of these young men who have maybe one child that's a year old or 2 years old, I would say he's elder material. What do I mean by that? You tell me, what do I mean by elder material? Well on their way, developing qualities to be elders in the future. And so what we want you as the congregation to be doing, and we've talked to the men in the men's meeting back in whenever we had that August, about this concept. So here's some things we want you to know. We're going to ask you to submit names at the end of this study. We don't want them right now. We want you to think about that for the period of this study. And what we're talking about this is not the appointment of men now. We're not asking you to turn in men named that you think are ready to be appointed in January. That's not our goal. What we're interested in is you're asking for those that you think that could be qualified in the next 1 to 3 years. And another group maybe in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, those numbers may change. Those have not been finalized in our elders meeting. So when we announce it, it may be 1 to 5 years and 5 to 10 years. But right now we're sticking with 1 to 3 and 3 to 5. So here is somebody that's in that 1 to 3 year category. Here's somebody else in that 3 to 5 year. There's some guys that will be qualified 20 years from now. We're not interested in that right now of their names coming in. What we're going to be interested in, unlike the appointment process, we're not asking you to go talk to that person and ask them to be agreeable. Or if you have some objection, to go to them, as we will in the process of the appointment. But what we will ask you is to tell us what you think they need to work on. John Doe could be qualified in the next 2 to 3 years. His brother Jim Doe could be qualified in the next 4 to 5 years. John Doe needs to work on XYZ if he's going to be qualified. His brother needs to work on ABC. Make sense? In my opinion, you're telling the elders. And then the elders will plan to sit down with those men and say, you know what, we've had 10 people or 15 people or 3 people to turn your name in. We're not going to tell you who they are. Who said what's not going to be revealed. But generally the congregation has said, you need to work on XYZ. Let's see if we can work on that. How can we help you with that you might be qualified in that 1 to 3 years or in 3 to 5 years? Does that make sense? Now you'll see this chart again, this slide again. Just be thinking of that as we go through the leadership process and the leadership study that I mean. Here's the 17 lessons. I'm not going to go through each one of these in interest of time, but I want you to notice the kind of things we're going to deal with. Next week, we're going to deal with Nehemiah as a leader. So you might read through the book of Nehemiah, watching for characteristics of leadership. We're going to spend 3 lessons on visions, plans, and answers. Leaders have to have visions and goals and plans and answers to problems. That's thus the assignments we've been having or will be having. We're going to deal with 2 lessons on dealing with the problems. We'll talk about work and authority of elders. Later on, we'll talk about qualifications of elders, characteristics that make people want to follow you, why why leaders don't lead, what can I do to prepare to lead. Those are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about in the series. So let's talk about question number 1 for tonight. We'll come to the assignment toward the end. And that is the question of what is a leader? If a man is going to be a leader, he needs to know what a leader is. The teacher asked her class, hoping they would understand and give the correct answer. She said, I am the top elected official of the state, and I live in a mansion. Who am I? When little boy raised his hand, little Johnny raised his hand, and he said, you're a confused person. She said, why do you say I'm a confused person? Johnny said, if you don't know who you are a confused person. Well, a leader who doesn't understand what a leader is a confused person. Does that make sense? All right. So you tell me, answer to question number 1. What is a leader? All right, one who leads or guides in charge of others. What else would you say?
Good example to the flock.
Say again?
Good example to the flock.
All right, he's a good example to the flock. All right, what is a leader?
One who has authority over the flock. That goes beyond just directing, but also taking care of them.
Okay, has some authority and direction and taking care, is interested in those whom he leads. I'm not looking for one particular answer. I'm fishing just for ideas here. What is a leader? All right, one who others willingly follow and don't have to be forced to follow. Say again? One who is respected. Leads by example. All right? All right, bears responsibility for the well-being of others. We're going to come back to that word responsibility. Not tonight so much, we will some, but not, we'll say more about that a little bit later. A leader bears responsibility. I'm just going to leave that there. I want to come back to that. Good thought. What else? Let's get one or two more. All right, it's one who educates themselves and can communicate their principles and thoughts clearly to others. Let's define a leader now. We're not going to be exhaustive in this because we'll still be defining a leader in Lesson 2, Lesson 7, Lesson 8, Lesson 12, Lesson 17. I just randomly picked those. In other words, all lessons. Every one of these lessons are going to be defining a leader. What a leader is and what a leader involves. Now, the dictionary just simply says it's one who leads and guides. The word lead simply means to show the way by going in advance, to guide and direct the course, to guide the actions and opinions of others. Well, that's pretty simple. A leader is one who is out front, willing to take charge. Now, let's talk about leaders in general. So this could be the coach of the team. It could be the CEO of the company. It may be the chief of the department. It may be the president of the nation. You name it. It may be an elder in the church, the father in the home. A leader is one who is out front, willing to take charge. Therein comes that responsibility just mentioned a moment ago. He's bearing responsibility. Now, John Maxwell said a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. He's right about that. He knows here's where we need to go, and he's going to go there, and he's going to show you how to go there. He's got a plan for getting there. Now let's think about great leaders in the Bible. Were they not out front? So I don't want to develop this in great detail, or we're going to miss some other things. But I just want to get the gist before you. Was Moses, and I know he shrunk back a little bit at first, but when he did take the lead, was he not out front, taking charge? No, leadership class is like every other class we've had, up and down his yes, back and forth, no. Wasn't he out front? All right. What about Nehemiah? Next week we're going to see he was out front, leading. Same thing with Ezra, with Joshua, with Peter. These were men who were out front, and that is they were leading. They were not sitting back thinking, I don't know what we're going to do, and I don't have a clue which way to go. They were out front, and they were leading. Nixon said in his book, In the Arena, to wish is passive, to will is active, followers wish, leaders will. Now think about what that means, that followers wish. I wish we had the answer. I wish we knew what to do. Leaders will. They'll make the determination. Here's where we're going. Here's what we need to be doing. The qualifications of elders suggest that he is to be skilled so that he could be out front. That's why he's to be, well, just you tell me what qualification would suggest that he's going to be an out front person. Able to teach, that's the most obvious one. And he's to be able to convict the gainsayer. He may be the one that has to deal with the error out front, rather than sitting back, who's going to deal with this? I don't know what to do. He's going to deal with it. He may be the one that has to deal with that. So he's going to be an out front person. Now this is an important point. A leader doesn't sit back and wonder, what are we or what are they going to do? A problem arises, and a leader who's sitting back twiddling his thumb saying, what are we going to do? We got a problem here. That's not the leader. The leader is the one that says, here's what we're going to do. Here is the response. Here is the answer to that. Here is the direction we're going to go. Does that make sense? Now, we're right in the middle of an election cycle, You would not be impressed with someone, and I'm not talking about our candidates, let's just erase those candidates off the picture. And let's suppose we've got two other people running. What if one of them come up and said, right in the middle of a crisis, I don't know how to handle, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't have a clue how we're going to respond. The rumor is there's an atomic bomb being dropped and I don't know what to do. I want the leader that says, here's what we're going to do. Here is the response. Here is how we're going to deal with this. That tells me they're out front. Does that make sense? Same thing in the church. The same principle applies. All right, here's a couple of quotes I want to give you. I'm not going to share all of these in detail. Leadership is the process of influencing the activities of an organized group in the task or goal of goal setting and goal achievement. In other words, a leader helps the group say, here's the goals we have, and doesn't just set back, but here's how we're going to meet those goals. And so if you have goals and you know how to achieve those goals, then you may be a leader. As an inspirer of others, it's giving proper direction and help to those others who become leaders too. I like this quotation here from General T.L. Campbell. Leadership is when people are going around one corner, the leader's going around the next one. He's out front. John Quincy Adams says, if your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and become more, you are a leader. That's what leaders are. Any other quotations on what a leader is before we talk about what a leader is not? I want to just list some things that a leader is not. He's not Superman or Einstein, but Superman, he can do anything and he knows everything. He doesn't have all the answers to everything. That's not what a leader is. He's not born a leader, but he's developed. He's not merely a Christian. What would I mean by that? Not everyone is qualified to lead. Maybe, just like not everyone's qualified to teach. Maybe they should develop that. Maybe they should have worked at it. Maybe they failed. But the principle is not everybody is a leader. Just because a man is a Christian doesn't make him a good leader. Doesn't mean that he's a bad person. Just means he's not a leader. He's not merely a starter. People can start but not finish. He's not merely one who's able to do a task, but he needs to be able to delegate. Now let's talk about the need for leadership. Now we'll come back to the second part of your questions handout in just a few moments. Let's talk about the need for leadership. Why do we need leadership? All right, there's always going to be problems. Say again? We need one direction. Without that one direction, we're scattered. Somebody said something over here. To avoid chaos, absolutely. Would you agree with this? Each congregation is where it is now because of the leadership it has or the lack of leadership. Would you agree with that? In other words, if they're on the right course, there was some sort, may not even have elders, but there was some form of leadership. Somehow people were leading in the right direction or wrong direction, as the case may be. So every church is where it is because of the leadership that it has. Now, God demands leadership. What passage would you cite that shows God demands leadership? Say again? Titus 1:5. That they were to appoint elders in every city. Paul told Titus to appoint elders in every city. We'll come back to that. The fact that God gave an order of authority suggests God wanted leadership. Man was to lead over the woman, 1 Corinthians 11. God has a plan for elders in every church. Acts 14:23, Titus 1:5, every city. So God has a plan for elders. God wants men to be proven to lead. What am I meaning by that? What if you had a visitor with you and said, what does he mean by men have to be proven that they can lead? And he cited 1 Timothy and Titus. What does that mean? Yeah, exactly. He needs to prove by the leadership in his household that he can lead the flock of God. That was the argument in both of those texts, in Titus and in Timothy. Now, the fact that God appointed leaders, for example, the patriarchs were leaders in their family. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were leaders, and Noah was a leader, and so was Moses and Joshua, the prophets, the kings, the judges, and the apostles, and the elders. In every generation, in every dispensation, God had leaders. And that goes without having to establish that very far. And so there's a need for leadership. Now, people need to be led. Why do I say that? Very good. Everybody present knows, but there'll be people watching online don't know this. I'm not a sports person, but I'm asking for information here, you sports guys. Has there ever been a successful team that didn't have a coach? That's a serious question. Has there been? Anybody know a football team that didn't have a coach? I don't mean they didn't have a head coach and somebody else was filling it. Has there ever been a successful team that didn't have a coach of some sort? Maybe it's an assistant or somebody that took over, the quarterback became basically the coach. Has there ever been a successful team that didn't have a coach? Has there? Nobody knows of one. Why do you have to have a coach? Has to be a game plan, yeah. Has to have some direction. What we're going to do, what plays we're going to run. So, or otherwise, it's going to be utter chaos. Matthew chapter 15 and in verse 14. What do you learn from that passage? Somebody turn there and tell me what you learn about the need for leadership. The blind can't lead the blind. So there's a need for leadership. Well, somebody is going to lead, and it may be the right direction, may be the wrong direction, it may be poor direction, it may be prepared leadership, unprepared. Somebody is going to be in leadership. I want to quickly mention this, and then we're going to go to our question here in a moment, our assignment. Let's talk about qualities, or rather, the fact that there is a lack of leadership. What I want to suggest to you is people fail from a lack of leadership. I want to go to Ezekiel chapter 22 just for a moment. If you'll turn there with me. And I just want to get the gist. This is just a sampling in these two passages in Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel 22 and verse 23 beginning. This is the wicked leaders of Israel. And the point here is, look at verse 25. He condemns the prophets. The conspiracy of her prophets in her midst are like a roaring lion. Look down at verse 26. Her priests have violated the law. Look at verse 27. Her princes in her midst are like wolves tearing the prey. What I want you to see is one group of leader after another group of leaders after another group of leaders were held responsible for the condition of the people. Does that make sense? And so the point is, people fail because of a lack of leadership. Let's go to Ezekiel 34. See a similar point quickly. Ezekiel 34, beginning at verse 1. Again, he said, Son of man, I'm reading at verse 2, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, Thus says the Lord God to the shepherds, Woe to the shepherds of Israel who feed themselves. Should they not feed the flock? And then he mentions later more of that same, all the way going down through verse 9. People fail for a lack of leadership. So there is a lack of leadership even among God's people. It was in the Old Testament times and is true today. I want to suggest to you that poor leaders are not real leaders. I want to list some different types of leaders here quickly. One is a figurehead leader that wears the name. What's that about? Yeah, wears the title. So maybe we appoint him as an elder and he wears the title of an elder, but he doesn't do any aspect of the work, not overseeing the flock. Really is not a leader among the elders. He just pretty much goes along with anything that's being said. All right, here's another type of leader, a dictator who manipulates and controls. That one's pretty obvious. A forced leader. What's that about? Yeah, he's not capable, but he really doesn't want that. He's kind of forced and pushed. If you don't go in, we won't have elders, so kind of force him into the eldership, and so he's kind of a forced leader. And he's not going to be worth anything as a leader. What's a yes man? He's a pleaser, goes along with others, and generally the one that agrees with the one who really leads. So here may be an elder that's the real leader, but here's someone else that just goes along with whatever that other elder may say. I'm a yes man, so I just go along with whatever he says because I'll agree with his judgment. He's not a true leader. Or the financial or material leader. What's that about? Yeah. Always interested in the building and money and finances and those kinds of things, what we pay or what we spend. But what about the souls of people and how can we improve? Well, he's not interested in that too much. And then here's the leader that must be led. What's that about? Has to consult with someone else. Has to be pushed a little bit to make decisions. Say again? Lack of understanding. You've heard the story about the man standing on the side of the road, and here comes a group of people running down the road right in front of him, and they turn the corner and take off, and then a little bit behind him, here comes a single man by himself, just running as hard as he can. And he stops and asks the bystander, said, "Which way did the group go?" And he said, "Well, he went down and turned to the right." "Why?" He said, "Because I'm their leader and I'm trying to catch up with them." Well, he's not much of a leader if he's running behind. I once talked to a church about moving there that it became obvious to me that talking to the elders, I didn't end up going there, but talking to the elders, that they seemed like in all of the conversation I had with them, that they would lead in the right direction if someone pushed them and just kept nudging them in the right direction. I wasn't interested in working with elders that needed to be led. I want to work with elders that lead, and there's a big difference. Make sense? All right. I want to skip that section right there and go to qualities of a good leader. What are the qualities of a good leader? Let's talk about that one just quickly.
Consistent.
All right. What do you mean?
A good leader is one who can be trusted, that they're going to be constant, whether they make the same type of decision repeatedly. They're easy to follow if they're consistent.
Okay, very good. Easier to follow. What else would you say? Quality of a good leader. All right. Doesn't take everything personally. Good listener. Wise and knowledgeable. All right. Doesn't follow their own whim. Has some principle of following the guidebook. What else? All right. Those are all good. Let me run through just a few here, and then I want us to move on to our assignment. One is he shows leadership and authority in his home. Show me a man, and there's plenty of men that would fit this description. I don't mean there's plenty here. I'm just saying there's plenty of men across the country who their wives are the leaders or their children are the leaders in their home, and that man's not fit for the eldership, period. End of sentence on that one. He has credibility. By that we simply mean he's trustworthy. He has an open mind, as just mentioned a moment ago, that he's willing to listen to other opinions, and so he's open to suggestions. He gets along with others, and that's going to make it easier for him to work with others when he gets along with others. I like to quote someone, I don't remember who said this, that a man's personality sometimes is like a bent safety pin. It doesn't fit anywhere and is always sticking people in the wrong place. Well, sometimes that's the case. He needs to have confidence, not to be confused with arrogance. What does that mean? All right, very good. What's the difference in confidence and arrogance? Are they the same thing? Say what? Attitude? Confidence is again for the right reason. Okay.
You can be humble and confident.
All right.
Power under control. It's not understands that about themselves and understands their own weakness are always looking for those traps from the devil. And they're aware that that can happen, and so they're wary, they're prepared, they're on guard.
Good point. Good point. Another characteristic is communication. He needs to communicate with his followers. This is true of a coach. This is true of a teacher. This is true of elders. They need to communicate with the followers. People are hesitant to follow those that they don't know where they're being led. People want to know where we're going and why are we going that direction. And so they want men who listen, and they want someone who involves others and uses the abilities of others. He is approachable. What does that mean? He needs to be approachable.
You will come to him when you have problems, not worried about him making fun of you or insulting you in any way.
Okay. In what way would a man be unapproachable? Got a bad temper? Not willing to listen. He kind of pushes you off with your suggestion. What else?
One who makes assumptions. So if they're not listening well, they're making assumptions of what you may tell them.
Okay. Makes too many assumptions. Okay. Good point. Good point.
Confidence comes back in, because if you are, there's a lot of people who don't feel confident, and so when somebody comes and questions, or they feel that they have to defend themselves, they have to come back harder, or they have to, show that they didn't make a mistake or whatever. So if you're confident enough to say, yeah, I made a mistake there.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. He needs to be knowledgeable. By knowledgeable, he needs to be knowledgeable of the text, but he also needs to be knowledgeable of the people he leads. He might be an elder in one place and know those people, but that doesn't make him a good elder in another place till he knows those people. Does that make sense? He needs to know the people. He needs to know the problem we're dealing with. He may not have all the data. We'll talk about that here in just a second. And then finally, he needs to be one who will stand. What does that mean? He needs to stand for the truth, stand for the decision that's been made, even when you're alone. Good point. Brother Ed Dye, most of you wouldn't know of him. I held a meeting where Ed Dye was at the time I was living in Alabama and going through some real difficult times. And he gave me some advice I never forgot. He said, don't ever, ever take a stand unless you're willing to stand by yourself. And there were times I did. And as an elder, you may have to stand by yourself. You might not even have the other elder standing with you. But if you think it's right, you need to be willing to stand. And so those are characteristics. All right. Now, I'm going to skip the little test here of are you a leader? And let's go to our solutions, looking for solutions. Each time we're going to be, as I mentioned last week, if you're not here last week, these assignments are real circumstances that I've either heard of somewhere or maybe the elders where I had worked when I wasn't an elder in one of the churches where I've worked, or maybe we've dealt with it here. These are real case circumstances, so these are not just made up kind of things. So here's a problem, and what we're trying to do here is not necessarily have the solving of the problem, but to understand the kinds of things that leaders deal with, so that men who are not serving as elders, this is the kind of thing you're going to be dealing with, these kind of scenarios. And so you're going to be subjected to meeting with other elders who are going to have maybe a different opinion of how to answer that. So let's go with this. Here's the problem. Some of you already asked me more details. I don't know all the details of that. Well, that's on purpose, partly. And for two reasons. One, we don't have space to spell out all the details. I wasn't going to give you 10 pages, number one. And number two, that's part of the problem. Sometimes you're not given all the information at first. So here's the problem. You're one of the elders, and you've been informed that one of the Bible class teachers is not doing his or her job adequately teaching the children. How would you handle this situation if you were one of the elders? David? Okay? Good point. Good point. On the back of your sheet or somewhere, if you've got some room, I want to list 3 lessons that we're going to learn from that. And the first one's already been exemplified in these 2 comments. And you may want to add to this one too, but then I'm going to list 2 others as we get to it in a moment. The first thing in solving this or any other problem is, and so what Jared and David just said, I'm going to reword it in this fashion: get all the facts, get both sides. Proverbs 18:17. Every leader needs to know this principle. He that is first to defend his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him. There's 2 sides to the story. Maybe more, but at least 2. And it doesn't mean somebody's lying, it just means a different perspective. Proverbs 18 is not saying somebody's lying, just saying there's a different perspective. So, get all the facts. We don't have all the facts from this. You want to know, if this is all that's given to me, what are you going to do now as one of the elders? I'm going to get facts. Aren't you going to go confront? Not yet. I'm not confronting the teacher. I'm not removing the teacher. I'm not even going to call an elders meeting for us to deal with till we get some more information. I'm not calling an elders meeting tonight and say, we got to deal with this teacher. I don't know enough to deal with it yet. Get all the facts. Does that make sense? Leaders need to get all the facts. And this is a good point. Talk to the teacher, talk to other parents, talk to other students. If they're older students, if it's younger students, talk to the parents. Get some information. And you can do that without accusing the teacher. Something else you might do is just casually ask the teacher, how's your class going? See what her perspective. She may say, I've got a problem student. Tell me what the problem is. Make sense? All right, what else would you do? We ain't solved it yet. We just said we're going to get the facts. Good point.
That she may need assistance with, or may not want to come out and say, I'm having trouble with this. She might want to, she needs that assistance, but she's not quite willing to ask for it. Maybe she doesn't know how to ask for it.
Good point. It may be the material that the elders gave her was not good material. That's happened before. We've looked at material, thought it looked pretty good, give it to a teacher, and the teacher's frustrated, and the parents are frustrated, and it comes back to the elders because we weren't careful with the material. It's really our fault. The class is not going well. But she may need some help with material. She may need some help with an assistant. If it's a small class, she may need some help in any other area. So that's a good point. Good point. What else would you do? See what's going on? Okay.
I think, see the person complaining not doing their job adequately, I want to know what they meant by inadequate. It might be that I think the teacher's bored.
That's a good point. And part of getting all the data and all the facts, I wanted to ask that parent that came to me, or the student, I want more information. You say they're not doing the job adequately. What do you mean? Is it not in depth enough? Are they not explaining the text? Are they not spending time on the material? What is the inadequacy? And let's zero in on that. I'm not going to approach a teacher saying, you're inadequate as a teacher. And she says, in what way? I don't know. I just told you were inadequate. That's not going to work at all.
I would want to know too if they had initiated discussion with the person that they think is inadequately teaching. If they had, sometimes it's just, if you bring something to a teacher's attention, they can correct that. It's almost like in school, the parents who email the principal before they email the teacher about the kid's problem. The teacher's the one that's in the room with them. So, have you had a discussion with this person about what you're seeing?
Good point. Good
Or do
point.
you think you know?
All right, that's good. Would you encourage the parent to go to the teacher and discuss this? The parent that's come to you and said, hey, this,
But that depends on the person. If this person is known to, like Caleb said, a little tempered, it might not be a good idea.
it depends on the teacher and depends on that parent.
Depends on all parties.
All parties involved. What else would you do? Let's take another couple of minutes here and then we'll wrap up with some conclusions.
Find out if it's just a different style of teaching, that's the problem, or if it's an actual, like, problem with the truth is not being taught, or error is, or something like that.
All right? Yeah, if it's truth or error, that's a different story. But I might inquire to either the parents or the parents of other children, or I might inquire of the teacher, is this student listening well? It may be the student is not listening. Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes a teacher will get a student that is way, age-wise, on the same level, but maturity-wise or Bible knowledge-wise, that is way below level, and that's a hard class to teach when you've got 3 or 4 excellent Bible students and one that's on basic kindergarten level. That makes a very hard situation. You have some students that like interrupting and disrupting a class.
Absolutely.
I would talk to that teacher, and your question of how's the class going, because teachers will hesitate to come and say, I've got a kid in here that's driving me crazy.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you do get one, and they are determined to do everything they can to disrupt the class. If there's error being taught, it's got to be stopped right away. One good thing about elders having wives, you might just say, can my wife help you in your class for a little while? And she can pick up pretty much, because whatever level of material you're given, you can kind of, the teacher can adjust it to the level if they're all on the same level. But there comes times when I've left a class and I've thought, wow, that's a lousy class.
Yeah.
Those kids didn't learn a thing, and I think I just wasted time. And there are days when you just know you haven't done a good job, but
That's very difficult. Good.
it's enjoyable, I love it, but there are challenges.
There are challenges. Larry, and then we're going to wrap up here with some comments.
Well, this may not necessarily fix the problem, but sometimes, elders, if we're not careful, we just put teachers in with teachers. Thing is, elders, when we make a decision with a teacher, we're going to know who that teacher is, and we can have confidence in who that teacher is. So when somebody says there's a problem, then all of a sudden, we're going to go, that goes against what we understand a teacher to be. So the first start of anything is, do we know our teachers who we're putting in? If we don't have confidence in them, they don't need to be in that first place.
Good point. Good point. All right, the point of these scenarios is a learning process. It's not whether you agree with all that was said about what I want you to see, what the elders are wanting you to see in all these scenarios is how you go about settling it is multifaceted on judgment calls. So if the scenario was the teacher taught evolution and she's standing by that, what do? Pretty simple. That's not hard to figure that. You take her out, you rebuke her for teaching evolution, and then we're going to have a longer discussion about what we do about that. But she's not teaching the next class. She just taught error. That's a whole different story. These are judgment calls. So I said there are 3 things. So write these 3 things down, and especially if you're interested in being a leader. Number 1, we've already given. Get all the facts, both sides, Proverbs 18:17, on any scenario. Get all facts. Number 2, here's what you learn from this. And that is, in judgment calls, there's not always one easy solution. In judgment calls, there's not always one easy solution. Why don't the elders just do, well, wait a minute, that's not always an easy thing to find one easy solution. Well, that's simple. You just go to no. There's a lot of factors here we got to deal with. All right, here's the third thing. And this is what I was hearing from everybody. We need to work towards salvaging all parties involved. In other words, we're not going to rush to the rescue of the child at the expense of the teacher, or rescue the teacher at the expense of the parents and the child. We're going to try to work so that all people are salvaged. Not everybody happy. I'm not saying we're trying to make everybody happy. We're trying to make sure we salvage everybody in this conflict. Make sense? And that's what elders should always be trying. We're trying to salvage everybody in this. We want to come out on the other side with the teacher still teaching, and the students still learning, and the parents still taking their children to Bible class. That's what we're after. We're going to stop on that note right there.